My sister believes my house is a portal to another dimension, and now I'm hearing scratches in the walls. Should I humor her or call someone for help? It started subtly, as most strange things do. My sister Leslie has always been a bit dramatic, prone to exaggeration and flights of fancy. We're close, but in that way sisters sometimes are, with a layer of underlying competitiveness and a shared history of both intense closeness and equally intense arguments. So when she first started talking about my house feeling different, I mostly rolled my eyes. It's just heavier, she said one afternoon, perched on my couch, sipping tea and staring intently at my living room wall. Like the air is thick, can't you feel it, Eva? I took a deep breath, trying to discern any unusual atmospheric pressure. Leslie, it's a normal day, the air is fine, maybe you're just tired? She waved a hand dismissively. No, it's not me, it's the house, it's shifted. This was the beginning of it. Over the next few weeks, the shifted feeling became a full-blown theory. My house, according to Leslie, was not just different, it was a portal to another dimension. At first, it was almost comical. She'd point out signs. A light bulb flickering meant entities were trying to draw power. A draft in the hallway meant a dimensional rift had opened. The cat acting skittish? Obviously, sensing presences from beyond, I tried to be patient. Leslie, light bulbs flicker, houses have drafts. Cats are always skittish. It's winter, for goodness sake. But she was undeterred. Her conviction grew stronger with each sign she found. Then it started to get less funny and more concerning. She started talking about them, the entities. She described them as vague, shadowy figures, sometimes glimpsed at the edge of vision, sometimes felt as a cold spot in a room. She claimed they were drawn to my house, attracted by something I was apparently emitting. It's you, Eva, she declared one evening, her eyes wide and earnest. You're resonating, opening the way. Resonating, I repeated, feeling a prickle of irritation. Leslie, I'm working from home, trying to meet deadlines. I'm not resonating with anything except maybe caffeine and stress. She ignored my sarcasm. It's your energy, it's potent, and this house, it's receptive. It's always been a little off, hasn't it? Off my house? It was a perfectly normal, slightly older house in a quiet neighborhood. I'd lived here for 5 years, loved the big windows and the garden. Off was the last word I'd used to describe it. But Leslie was digging in. She started researching dimensional portals online, sending me links to articles about paranormal phenomena and quantum physics theories she barely understood. She even brought over books, thick tomes with titles like Interdimensional Gateways and the Human Aura and The Veil Between Worlds. I tried to reason with her, to gently steer her back to reality. I suggested she was stressed, maybe needed a break from work. I even offered to go to a spa day with her. She refused, her focus entirely consumed by the portal in my house. Then came the rituals, small things at first. She started leaving crystals around the house to ward off negative energies. Then came the sage smudging, filling my house with a cloying, smoky smell that irritated my sinuses. She'd walk through each room, chanting under her breath, cleansing the space, sealing the rift. It was becoming intrusive, unsettling. My normally tidy house was now cluttered with crystals, smelling perpetually of smoke. And Leslie's behavior was escalating. She was spending more and more time at my house, often uninvited, always on high alert for signs of the entities. One evening, I came home from work to find her in the living room, surrounded by candles, incense burning, and a strange symbol drawn on the floor in chalk. She was sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, humming softly. Leslie, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. What is this? She opened her eyes, blinking slowly. A protection ritual for the house, for you. Protection from what? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. From them, she whispered, nodding towards the walls as if they were listening. They're getting stronger, I can feel it. That's when I started to feel truly worried. This wasn't just sisterly eccentricity anymore. This felt like something deeper, something concerning. I loved Leslie, but this obsession was becoming overwhelming and, frankly, a little frightening. I needed to figure out how to help her and how to reclaim my own home from this dimensional drama. Update 1 *, things have definitely escalated. The rituals have become more elaborate, more frequent. The crystals have multiplied, now adorning every windowsill, shelf, and even tucked into plant pots, much to the dismay of my actual plants, I suspect. The sage smudging is practically a daily occurrence. My house smells like a head shop, and I'm constantly finding ash residue on surfaces. But it's not just the rituals, it's Leslie's behavior. She's become intense. Her eyes are always darting around, scanning for movement, for shadows. She speaks in hushed tones as if afraid of being overheard by whatever she thinks is lurking in the walls. And unsettlingly, things have started happening in the house. Small things at first. Lights flickering more often than usual. Doors creaking open in the middle of the night. Objects seeming to move slightly from where I left them. I know, logically, these are all explainable. Old house, electrical quirks, settling foundations, my own forgetfulness. but with Leslie's constant pronouncements of dimensional activity, it's hard not to feel a little unnerved. One night, I was working late in my home office when I heard a distinct tapping sound coming from the wall behind my desk. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate. I froze, listening intently. It stopped. Then, after a few minutes, it started again. Tap, tap, tap. My heart started to race. I told myself it was just the pipes or maybe a branch tapping against the siding in the wind, but there was no wind that night. And the tapping was too regular, too rhythmic to be natural. I got up slowly and pressed my ear against the wall. Silence. I straightened up and then, right behind me on my desk, my pen rolled off the edge and clattered to the floor. It was just a pen falling, but the timing, it felt deliberate. I jumped, startled, my skin prickling. I told myself to calm down, that I was letting Leslie's paranoia get to me. But the tapping, the pen, it was hard to shake off the feeling of unease. I haven't told Leslie about the tapping pen incident. I'm afraid it will only fuel her obsession, confirm her portal theory. Instead, I've tried to gently push back to challenge her beliefs. Leslie, I said the other day during one of her cleansing sessions, maybe these things you're seeing, feeling, maybe they're not dimensional entities, maybe it's something else. She stopped mid-chant, turning to me, her eyes narrowed. Something else, like what? Like stress, anxiety, maybe you're not sleeping well? I suggested tentatively. She scoffed. Don't be ridiculous, Eva, this is real. I'm telling you they're here. And they're getting closer. But what if it's not them? I pressed. What if it's something internal, something we can actually deal with instead of crystals and sage? She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she shook her head slowly. You don't understand, Eva, you just don't understand. And she resumed her chanting, the smoke from the sage curling around her like a visible barrier. My concern for Leslie is growing. This isn't just a quirky belief anymore. It's consuming her. And now, with these strange occurrences in my house, I'm starting to feel a flicker of something, not belief exactly, but uncertainty. A seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of my sister's conviction. I still think it's all in her head, or maybe just stress manifesting in strange ways. But the tapping, the pen, it's hard to completely dismiss. I need to find a way to help Leslie before this portal consumes us both. And I need to figure out what's really going on in my house before my own sanity starts to fray. Update 2, okay? Things have taken a truly bizarre turn. I'm starting to feel like I'm living in a low-budget horror movie, and I'm not sure if I'm the protagonist or the victim. The strange occurrences have intensified. It's not just flickering lights and creaking doors anymore. It's sounds. Whispering sounds, just at the edge of hearing, like someone is murmuring just outside the room, but when I open the door, there's nothing there. Sometimes it sounds like voices, indistinct, garbled like static on a radio. And the smells. Strange, metallic smells that come and go without explanation. Once I smelled ozone, like after a lightning storm, but the sky was clear. Another time, it was a coppery, blood-like scent that made my stomach churn. The most disturbing incident happened last night. I was in bed trying to sleep when I felt a cold draft. I pulled the covers tighter, thinking it was just the old windows again. Then I heard it. A scratching sound coming from inside the wall behind my headboard. Scratch, 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 like claws dragging across wood. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding. The scratching continued, slow, deliberate, chillingly close. I reached for my phone, fumbling in the dark, my hands shaking. I was about to call Leslie to ask her if this was normal portal activity when the scratching stopped. Just as suddenly as it started, silence. Except for the frantic thumping of my own heart. I lay there, frozen, listening for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The scratching didn't return. Eventually, exhaustion and fear won out, and I drifted into a fitful, dream-filled sleep. This morning, I was a mess. Tired, jumpy, on edge. I called Leslie not to tell her about the scratching but to try a different approach. I decided to play along, to engage with her portal theory, but on my terms. Leslie, I said when she answered, about the portal, maybe you're right. There was a pause. Right about what? She asked, sounding wary. About the house being different, about things happening. I hesitated, then plunged in. I heard something last night, scratching in the wall. Silence again. Then a slow, deliberate scratching? Yes, like claws or something. I tried to sound casual, like I was just mentioning an odd noise, not confessing to a night of terror. Claws, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. There, reaching through. Reaching through? I asked, feigning curiosity. From the other dimension? Yes, she said, her voice gaining strength, conviction flooding back in. They're trying to break through. The veil is thinning, Eva, I told you. Okay, I said slowly. Okay, so, what do we do? Do, she echoed. We have to. Strengthen the defenses. We have to. Seal the portal. Seal it, I asked. How do we do that? And that's when she launched into a whole new level of portal theory, involving ancient rituals, specific herbs, and a complex sequence of chanting and symbolic gestures. She insisted on coming over immediately to assess the situation and begin the sealing process. I agreed hesitantly. Part of me is still deeply skeptical, convinced this is all Leslie's imagination running wild, fueled by my own heightened anxiety. But another part of me, the part that heard the scratching in the wall, that smelled the ozone, that felt the cold spot in the hallway, that part is starting to wonder. What if Leslie is right? What if their asterisk is something strange happening in my house? And if so, what the hell am I supposed to do about it? Leslie is on her way over now, armed with more crystals, herbs, and a disturbingly detailed plan for sealing the portal. I'm going to play along to see where this leads. Maybe, just maybe, if I engage with her theory, I can gently guide her back towards reality, towards seeking help for whatever is really going on with her. Or maybe I'm about to find out that my house really is a portal to another dimension. Either way, I have a feeling things are about to get even weirder. Wish me luck. My husband joined a survivalist group and wants us to relocate to Idaho and live off-grid. Now he's accusing me of being complacent for not wanting to leave our comfortable life. My husband John has always been a bit of a planner, meticulously organized and prepared for every eventuality. It was one of the things I initially found endearing, that sense of security he projected. We've been married for 10 years, and in that time, his planning has mostly manifested in sensible ways. Retirement savings, emergency kits in our cars, detailed vacation itineraries. Nothing too out of the ordinary. Until recently. About 6 months ago, John started spending an unusual amount of time online. He'd close the laptop screen whenever I walked into the room or quickly switch tabs on his phone. When I asked what he was looking at, he'd brush it off as work-related, even though his job has nothing to do with online research. I didn't push it. We both value our privacy, and I figured if he wanted to tell me, he would. Looking back, I should have pressed harder. Last night after the kids were in bed, John sat me down in the living room. He had this serious, almost solemn look on his face that immediately made me uneasy. He started talking about the state of the world, about increasing instability, about the fragility of our systems. I nodded along, thinking he was just stressed about current events, something we all are to some extent. Then he dropped the bomb. "Juliet," he said, taking my hands, "I've joined a group, a survivalist group." I blinked. "A survivalist group?" I repeated, trying to process what I was hearing. I pictured camouflage gear, underground bunkers, and stockpiles of canned goods. It felt like a caricature from a movie, not something my husband, a software engineer who enjoys craft beer and board game nights, would be involved in. He nodded, his expression earnest. "Yes, they're incredibly knowledgeable, Juliet. They understand what's coming. We need to be prepared." "Prepared for what, John?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Prepared for the apocalypse." He didn't flinch at the word. "It's not out of the realm of possibility, Juliet. Look at everything happening. Climate change, political unrest, economic instability. It's all pointing in one direction. And that direction is off-grid living?" I questioned, incredulous. "Exactly," he said, his eyes lighting up like he was finally getting through to me. "We need to get off the grid, Juliet. Become self-sufficient. Learn to live off the land." He then proceeded to outline his plan, which apparently had been forming for the past 6 months. He'd been attending meetings online and in person with this group. He'd been learning about foraging, water purification, building shelters, and alarmingly, firearms. He showed me a binder, thick and meticulously organized, filled with printed articles, hand-drawn diagrams, and notes in his neat handwriting. It was a survivalist manual, tailored to our family. He wants us to sell our house, our perfectly comfortable suburban home in a good school district, and buy land in a remote area. He wants to build a cabin, learn to grow our own food, generate our own power, and essentially disconnect from modern society. He wants our kids, 10-year-old Cecilia and 7-year-old Julian, to grow up learning to hunt and fish, not playing video games and attending soccer practice. "John, this is insane," I said, finally finding my voice again. "We have a life here. We have friends, jobs, family. The kids are in school. We're happy. Or I thought we were. We're complacent, Juliet," he corrected me. "We're living in a fool's paradise. This life, this comfort, it's not sustainable. It's going to collapse." "Collapse?" I scoffed. "John, the economy fluctuates. There are political disagreements. That doesn't mean society is going to crumble." "You're not seeing the bigger picture," he insisted, his voice taking on a frustrated edge. "This isn't just about the economy or politics. It's about everything. The whole system is teetering on the brink." He went on, for what felt like hours, explaining his vision of the future, a future where self-reliance is the only path to survival, where community is built on shared skills and resilience, not on neighborhood barbecues and school fundraisers. He talked about the importance of being prepared, of protecting our family, of escaping the inevitable chaos. I listened, mostly in stunned silence, as his carefully constructed plan unfolded. It was detailed, thorough, and completely detached from reality, at least my reality. The reality where I work as a librarian, where Cecilia dreams of becoming a veterinarian and Julian wants to be a superhero. The reality where we order pizza on Friday nights and argue about whose turn it is to do the dishes. When he finally finished, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate hope for understanding, for agreement. "What do you think, Juliet?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost pleading. What did I think? I thought my husband, the man I'd built a life with, had become a stranger. I thought he'd traded our comfortable, predictable life for a fantasy, a fear-fueled delusion. I thought about our kids, about uprooting them from everything they know and love and dragging them into some off-grid wilderness based on John's apocalyptic anxieties. "John," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "I think you've lost your mind." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "Lost my mind? I'm trying to save our family." "By destroying it," I retorted. "By turning us into survivalists? That's not our life, John. That's not who we are." The argument went on late into the night, going in circles, neither of us budging. He couldn't understand my resistance, and I couldn't fathom his sudden, drastic shift. We went to bed angry and exhausted, the chasm between us wider than ever. This morning, the tension in the house is thick enough to cut with a knife. John is quiet, withdrawn, radiating a simmering resentment. The kids sense it too, walking on eggshells, their usual morning chatter muted. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to bridge this gap, how to bring him back from this survivalist rabbit hole he's fallen into. I love him, I do, but I don't recognize this man anymore. I'm scared, not just for our future, but for our present. This isn't just about moving off-grid. It's about something much deeper, something that feels like it's tearing our family apart. It's been a week since John's survivalist revelation, and things haven't improved. If anything, they've gotten worse. We're barely speaking, communicating mostly through curt notes left on the kitchen counter or clipped exchanges in front of the kids. The house feels like a battleground, each room a territory claimed by opposing sides. I've tried to understand, I really have. I've reread the survivalist binder he showed me, trying to see things from his perspective. I've even spent some time online, researching the groups he's involved with. What I found was a mix of practical preparedness advice and something else. A deep-seated fear, a distrust of government and society, a fascination with worst-case scenarios. It's a world of anxieties amplified, of solutions that feel more extreme than the problems they're meant to solve. I talked to my sister, Talia, about it. Talia is practical and grounded, not easily swayed by dramatic pronouncements. I needed her level-headed perspective. I explained John's plan, his sudden obsession with off-grid living, the survivalist group. Talia listened patiently, sipping her tea, her brow furrowed in concern. "So he wants you all to become homesteaders?" she summarized, a hint of skepticism in her voice. "More like apocalypse preppers," I corrected her. "It's not just about growing vegetables, Talia, it's about societal collapse." Talia chuckled softly. "John's always been a bit of a worrier, hasn't he?" "Yes, but this is different," I insisted. "This is consuming him. He's not sleeping well, he's constantly online, he's talking about selling everything. He's serious, Talia." "Okay," she said, putting down her teacup, her tone becoming more serious. "Have you asked him why? Why now? What's triggered this?" That was the question I hadn't been able to answer. He talks about the state of the world, about instability, but it feels like more than that, like something personal is driving this. Talia nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe it is, maybe he's feeling powerless. Like he can't control what's happening in the world, so he's trying to control his immediate environment, his family's safety." Her words resonated with me. John had been feeling stressed at work lately, facing increasing pressure and deadlines. Maybe this survivalist thing was a way for him to regain a sense of control, to feel like he was doing something proactive in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. "So, what do I do?" I asked her, feeling lost and overwhelmed. "How do I talk him out of this? How do I get him to see reason?" Talia shrugged. "You can't talk him out of it, Juliet. Not if he's this invested. You have to understand where he's coming from, even if you don't agree with it. Try to find the fear beneath the surface. And then, maybe you can find a compromise." Compromise. The word felt foreign in the current climate of our household, but Talia was right. I couldn't just dismiss his fears, no matter how irrational they seemed to me. I needed to understand them to address them if there was any hope of saving our marriage, our family. That evening, I tried again. I waited until the kids were asleep, then went to find John in his makeshift planning room, which had become the spare bedroom, now filled with maps, survival gear catalogs, and stacks of books on wilderness living. He looked up as I entered, his expression guarded. "John," I began, my voice soft, "can we talk? Really talk?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay." I sat down on the edge of the bed, facing him. "Talia and I were talking today," I said, "and she made me realize, maybe this isn't just about the apocalypse for you, maybe it's about something else." He frowned, his eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, like things are out of control?" I ventured, choosing my words carefully. He was silent for a long moment, staring down at his hands. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, he nodded again. Yeah, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Yeah, maybe. Work's been crazy, he continued, his voice gaining a little strength. Deadlines, pressure, it feels like it's never ending. And then the news, everything feels so uncertain, so fragile. I know, I said, reaching out to take his hand. He didn't pull away. It's scary, John, it is, but running away to the woods, that's not the answer. It might be, he argued, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. It might be the only way to protect us. Protect us from what, John? I asked gently. From stress, from uncertainty. We can face those things together here in our life. We don't have to abandon everything. We talked for hours that night, a real conversation, not an argument. He talked about his fears, his anxieties, his sense of helplessness. I listened, truly listened, trying to understand the emotional undercurrent driving his survivalist obsession. I shared my own fears, my worries about our family, about the future. We talked about our kids, about their needs, their dreams, their lives. By the end of the night, we hadn't solved anything. He hadn't abandoned his survivalist plan, and I hadn't suddenly embraced off-grid living. But something had shifted. The tension in the house had eased, replaced by a fragile sense of understanding. We were still miles apart on the issue, but at least we were talking again, listening again, seeing each other again, not as adversaries, but as partners, facing a challenge together, even if we disagreed on the solution. It was a small step, a tiny crack in the wall that had grown between us, but it was a start. And in the face of the overwhelming fear and uncertainty that had gripped our family, a start was all we had. 2 months have passed since John's initial announcement, and the survivalist binder is still on the spare bedroom dresser, a constant, silent reminder of the chasm that remains between us. We're talking more, communicating, even laughing occasionally, but the underlying tension is always there, a low hum beneath the surface of our daily lives. John hasn't given up on his off-grid dream, but he has, thankfully, dialed back the intensity. He's no longer spending hours online each night, and the spare bedroom has become less of a bunker and more of a storage room. He still attends his survivalist group meetings, but he's started going less frequently, and he stopped trying to convert me or the kids to his worldview. We've found a sort of uneasy truce, a fragile coexistence. We're living in the same house, sharing meals, co-parenting, but there's a distance, an unspoken question hanging in the air. What happens next? Last week, that question became a little less abstract, a little more pressing. John came home from a survivalist group meeting looking different, not excited or energized, but subdued, almost somber. Juliet, he said, sitting down heavily at the kitchen table, we need to talk. My stomach clenched. What is it? He hesitated, then took a deep breath. The group, they're planning something bigger. Bigger than moving off-grid? I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. He ignored my tone. They're talking about relocating, buying land together, building a community, a self-sufficient compound. Relocating where? I asked, my heart sinking. Idaho, he said, the word hanging heavy in the air. They've found a large parcel of land, remote, defensible. They're pooling their resources, planning to move within the next year. Idaho, thousands of miles away from our families, our friends, our jobs, our lives, away from everything familiar and comfortable. And you want to go? I asked, the question barely a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I don't know, Juliet. Part of me thinks it's the right thing to do, the safest thing for our family, but I don't want to lose you or the kids. His words surprised me. They were vulnerable, honest, a far cry from the fear-mongering pronouncements of the past months. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of the John I knew, the man I loved, beneath the layers of survivalist anxieties. John, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand, Idaho is a long way away. I know, he said, his grip tightening on my hand. And I know you don't want to go, the kids don't want to go. No, I confirmed. We don't. He sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of resignation. Then, I guess I have a decision to make. The next few days were agonizing. John was torn, visibly wrestling with his conflicting desires. He spent hours in his planning room, poring over maps and documents, but he also spent more time with the kids, playing games, helping with homework, just being present. He was caught between two worlds, two futures, and he couldn't seem to choose. Finally, last night, he came to me, his face etched with weariness but also a sense of resolve. Juliet, he said, sitting beside me on the couch, I'm not going to Idaho. Relief washed over me, a wave so intense it almost knocked me off my feet. You're not, he shook his head. No, I can't leave you, I can't leave the kids. This is our life, Juliet, here together. But, the group, I asked, still slightly hesitant to believe it. The apocalypse, he smiled, a small, tired smile, but a smile nonetheless. Maybe the apocalypse will wait, he said, and maybe we can face whatever comes together right here. He admitted that Talia was right, that his survivalist obsession had been driven by fear, by a need for control, by a feeling of powerlessness. He'd been so focused on preparing for a hypothetical future disaster that he'd been neglecting the very real, very precious present. He'd almost lost his family in his attempt to save them. We talked late into the night again, not about survival skills and off-grid living, but about our marriage, our family, our future. We talked about his anxieties and how we could address them in a healthier way without uprooting our lives. We talked about my fears and how we could rebuild the trust that had been shaken by his secrecy and his sudden, drastic shift. It's not a neat, perfect resolution. The survivalist binder is still in the spare bedroom, a reminder of a difficult chapter in our lives. John still has his anxieties, and I still have my worries. But we're talking, we're listening, we're choosing each other, choosing our family, choosing our life, not in some idealized off-grid wilderness, but right here in our imperfect, messy, beautiful reality. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to survive whatever comes our way.